Well, Jimmy Smits, your movie today is roasted fresh from the kitchens of Bert I. Gordon. It's a fetid little piece of tripe featuring sword and sorcery and Gary Lockwood and an embarrassed Basil Rathbone. It's called The Magic Sword.
This time we watch season 4, episode 11, The Magic Sword.
Which has only got one knight who lives.
But first, some follow-up maybe?
Yeah, we got a really fun letter from the previous episode. I really enjoyed it. Devoted listener Mandrake wrote in to say, get ready for this. Okay. So, Chris, if you are going to want that kayfabe where the riffers are reacting to what we are all seeing and sharing in the moment with no prep, don't also be upset when the riffers react to their own edits that make things confusing.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Mandrake goes on, they are supposed to be watching and reacting to the same shared experience as us at home. So it makes sense when they pretend not to understand when the film has been edited to the point of confusion.
Ooh. Wow. Well, I mean, Chris, how do you feel about this criticism?
I love this line of thinking. I love this feedback. Thank you so much, Mandrake. That's a really interesting spin on things. I don't fully agree with it, but I think it's a valid perspective that, like, if that's the way the kayfabe works for you, then beautiful, run with it. But I actually think the kayfabe doesn't work like that for me.
Oh, how come?
Well, because I think that part of the kayfabe is also that they're not editing the movie, that they are showing us a representative version of the movie, that it is as if we have seen Girls Town, not an edited version of Girls Town, so that if you watch the episode, you can walk away thinking, well, I know what Girls Town is like.
Okay.
So part of the kayfabe is them properly representing the movie to us. And the fact that it gets edited, we're supposed to ignore as part of the kayfabe. Now, I think Mandrake's perspective is completely valid. And I also think that if you like it when they make jokes that sort of break the rules and, you know, predict what's going to happen in the movie, if that's kind of fun for you because it's a nice shake it up, that's great too. Like, we all have our own approaches to what the reality of the show is. And, you know, that's fine.
I think they're saying, right, that of course, if the comedy is coming from the show being constructed in a particular way, that you can't enjoy one level of the joke without accepting some of the other things that come along with it, that they both come from the same underlying premise.
Yeah, well, they're saying, you know, the kayfabe, like what's the reality that's being presented here that we're supposed to buy into? And Mandrake is arguing that part of that is that we're watching the edited movie, that is the experience that they're going through. We're watching it, so to speak, live. And I'm saying, yeah, but I think there's more to the reality of it than that. But, like, I think both positions are reasonable.
Okay.
I don't know. I thought it was really interesting to bring that up as a possible place how you could read the reality of the situation. And I think that's great.
Okay.
And I was thinking about that as we were watching today's episode, because there's a moment that happens occasionally throughout the series where the bots make a joke that shows that they know that they are puppets.
Yes, that does happen occasionally. It's always fun when it does.
Yeah, I like that little moment of breaking the rules, but also is that part of the rules that, like, they know that this is a TV show? Because they do that sometimes. They're like, oh, that planet looks like the MST3K logo.
Yes.
And Joel says you're not supposed to know about that.
Yes.
I love moments like that, but that happens enough that it's like it's either playing into or toying with the rules of the reality, and it's all really interesting. And it's interesting to think about where that breaks down for everybody.
Or how much they're willing to accept it.
Or how much they care about it, yeah. And it's interesting that it's not, I mean, the show was on for such a long time, and the rules changed sometimes gradually, sometimes briskly over the course of the show, that, like, yeah, everybody's going to have a different opinion.
Sure, and when you have different people involved, of course the rules change.
Exactly. So I think it's really interesting. I loved the letter. I loved the attitude it took towards me. Thank you so much. More like that, please. Yay.
Yay. Okay, well, I guess we should see how that whole reality holds up throughout the magic sword. Let's get talking about the movie.
Let's go. This time we watched Season 4, Episode 11, The Magic Sword. Imagine if Bert I. Gordon had made the magic sword into a video game instead of a movie. Then you could play the part as the hero, George. You know, as in St. George and the Dragon. Kinda. Well, anyway, the tutorial level would have you stealing a magic sword and armor from your sorcerer mother Sybil, and then set off with 6 knights on a magical quest to save the lovely Princess Helene from the dastardly wizard Lodak. Why did the dastardly wizard Lodak kidnap the lovely Princess Helene? To feed her to his dragon, of course, as a treat, I assume. Anyway, you'd have to save the princess before your rival, the smug Sir Branton, reached her first and won her hand in marriage. And smug Sir Branton has a secret advantage. He's in cahoots with the dastardly wizard Lodak. But first, you and your 6 knights must make it through Lodak's 7 curses. Level 1 has an ogre. Level 2 has a deadly swamp. You get the idea. There's a desert level and a cave level, and there must have been an ice level. There's always an ice level in these games, right? But finally, you'd reach the final level, Lodak's castle. You'd watch a cutscene where dastardly wizard Lodak reveals he was planning to betray the smug Sir Branton all along, and you'd have to fight a 2-headed dragon to save the princess. And if you've done everything just right from the very beginning of the game, you'd unlock the best ending, where your sorcerer mother Sybil shows up and transforms into a panther and kills the dastardly wizard Lodak. Unfortunately, this was made into a movie, so instead of having all that fun yourself, you get to watch Gary Lockwood of 2001: A Space Odyssey fame have fun instead. And this is once again why video games are better than movies. The end.
Meanwhile, on the Satellite of Love, I feel like I'm at a street fair, since Joel is making big arm motions over a pad of paper, chatting up GPC while drawing her caricature. The bots are whispering to us about the process because they feel like this is more like art class because Joel's drawing her nude. Joel points out that actually all the bots are nude, and GPC faints as she looks on her nudie portrait. Dr. Forrester and TV's Frank interrupt the bots criticizing Joel's portraits to force the invention exchange. Joel and the bots have a beatnik turn on the beer hat worn by so many football fans and frat boys alike. But this one is a beret with bottled water flanking the sides. Now you, too, can be pretentious, hands-free. In response, Dr. F offers something no mad scientist should be without, the biohazard spill cleanup pillow. Frank performs a small play to show the efficacy of such an item. It's like the home shopping channel for evil. At movie break, Joel and the bots advertise Basil Rathbone doggy treats, or rather Basil Rathbone. The bots are dressed as pups and they go crazy for all the flavors with bits of Nigel Bruce throughout. I mean, who doesn't love a bit of Watson thrown in for fun? I know I do. Next, we see Joel, Crow, and GPC dressed in their best Ren Fair fare, displaying a whimsical version of the Middle Ages with kings and valiant knights and ladies fair. But Tom comes along, dressed as a serf, and undermines the lightheartedness with a dose of the realities of crushing wealth disparity, chivalry as a medieval toxic masculinity, and ladies-in-waiting as hotbeds for VD. Way to kill the mood, Tom. We've seen so much Estelle Winwood in the movie that Crow's affections for Kim Cattrall have wandered, and now he loves this fabulous lady, and he declares his love in song. Joel is completely supportive as Estelle is freaking great, everyone, and he's such a good dad. But Tom, he's a cruel brother type, and he decides to sing about all the people who are so much better looking than Estelle. Way to kill the mood, Tom. The movie included 7 curses, which inspires a laundry list of curses that you can say on TV. Move over, George Carlin. There's a new game in town. It's slightly off color, strong but not entirely inappropriate language, like Nimrod or poopy. The bots continue to list these while Joel attempts to read a letter. This devolves into a kind of jazzy lounge act with GPC scatting over Tom and Crow on bass and cymbal. Where's my big gulp beret? I could use that hands-free pompous hydration now. What do you think, sirs?
What did you think of the magic sword?
Oh my God, this thing was so much fun.
It is nice to be back in their Imperial era. They're running on all cylinders here.
Yes, and it's so sing-songy. Like, all the sketches seem to have like a little bit of music to them. And I always love that because it just makes everything flow and feel so much fun.
Had you seen this one before?
I had never seen this one before. I surely would have remembered Estelle Winwood's red hair.
I'm a little surprised that I wouldn't have shown it to you back in the day, but there are so many good episodes from this period.
It's true, and frankly, we would always get stuck on Alien from LA and just watch it again. I mean, familiar faces, familiar faces, familiar faces, familiar faces, familiar faces.
A lot of today's episode of It's Just a Show is going to be familiar faces, but I thought I'd mention a few that we're not going to get to later.
Ooh, okay.
We mentioned Gary Lockwood plays Sir George.
Sure.
Of course, Gary Lockwood played the other guy in 2001: A Space Odyssey, the one who gets killed while he's fixing the ship.
Not Dave.
Yeah.
The one that Hal doesn't talk to.
I don't remember whether he talks to it or not. I don't remember anything about Frank. His name's Frank in the movie. And while I remember that character exists, I've seen 2001 several times, and I have no strong impressions of Gary Lockwood's performance in that movie.
Well, if Hal does talk to him, he doesn't talk to him in some sort of famously quoted line, misquoted or otherwise. So,
well, exactly. He was also in one of the early Star Trek pilots. That's the other fun thing about Gary Lockwood. I guess there's more, but I don't necessarily
I'm sure
care.
there's more.
Yeah. And of course, Bert I. Gordon made this. We've talked about him a bunch. We'll link to episodes where you can hear more about that exciting character. We've got one of the dwarfs is played by Angelo Rossito, who was in The Corpse Vanishes and Hellzapoppin'. We talked about him a bit in the Shallow 13 for that episode. We get, for one line and in voiceover only, Paul Frees.
And, like, Joel points it out right away. Paul Frees, everybody.
So Ulrich of Germany.
Mein Kaiser, we come to serve.
The voice of Paul Frees.
Sir Anthony of Italy.
Yeah, it's great.
It is so good. It is so strange to hear his voice for one line coming out of somebody else's face.
Yeah.
Because I guess the guy who's playing the knight, one of the 6 knights, they're all from different countries, so it's very Benetton if Benetton was only available in Europe. So Sir Ulrich, I think it is, of Germany, whoever the actor is who's playing that, I guess couldn't do a convincing enough accent, even by the levels of this movie, which has some of the most atrocious Irish accents you can imagine.
Wow. It's so amazing.
But any excuse to, go down to the studio next door and grab Paul Frees and say, will you do me a favor? Can you give me one line, please?
Paul, please. I need your help. Yes, Bert. I'll be right there.
And there's one other name that jumped out in the credits for me. The Hag.
Uh-huh.
Not the nicest word in the world, but the ugly old woman version of the young woman that I guess. There's 2 old women. I don't know if they're the same actor. They might be.
This is the one that seduces the French knight and in the end gets Sir Branton as well?
Yeah, so this is the post-transformation woman. That role is played by Mila Normie.
I don't know who that is. Where would I know Mila Normie from?
Well, you probably know her by her stage name, Vampira.
Yes, I do. Sorry for the big gasp, everyone. Wow, Chris, you surprised me with that.
I was surprised by it as well because you don't recognize her in all the makeup or anything, but
Oh,
yeah,
I don't think you could recognize anybody with all that makeup. I mean, they did makeup that looked like her face was kind of melting off and became, like one big oval rather than a regular face shape.
Yeah. I have two fun facts about Mila Nurmi for you. One is probably just a fun fact for you. She grew up in Astoria, Oregon.
She did not.
Yeah, she spent her teenage years working in a cannery there.
Well, that tracks. Yeah.
And the second fun fact is something that I meant to give you when we did our little bonus bit Christmas special all about the later adult films of Ed Wood. I promised you a Vampira fun fact, and I never delivered on it.
Oh, well, I'm glad that you're delivering on your promises. Now, Chris, what's the fun fact?
So you might remember that one of the movies he did was called Necromania.
Yes.
And in the very end of the movie, there was a Madame Heels who is like running this house. It doesn't matter, but she's in a coffin. She emerges from the coffin, and the male lead has sex with her, and that's the climax of the film, let's say.
So to speak.
So the woman who played that role was not the first person that Ed Wood wanted to play that role. Ed Wood wanted his old friend Vampira to play the role.
Why didn't Vampira do it?
Well, I'm going to read what she says in the fantastic book Nightmares of Ecstasy, an oral history of Ed Wood and his work. She says, I was in General Hospital, not the TV show, the hospital.
Oh, no.
Because I had some kind of attack of paralysis and I was learning to walk again.
Oh, my gosh. Poor Vampira.
About 2 months later, I got a phone call. This beer-guzzling type guy said, Ed wants you. And then he proceeded to tell me what the thing was. You're laying in this coffin. You got nothing on. I was stunned, and all I could say was, I can't walk. He said, that don't matter. You can sit up, can't you?
Oh, my gosh.
He said, you ain't got nothing on. You're in this coffin, and you sit up. I think my jaw was hanging open. He said, yeah, and this guy jumps on you. He says, ow! So anyway, Mila continues, I told him I wasn't interested. Quote, Miss Garbo isn't working. I think she can probably sit up better than I can.
Oh my gosh. I know you want Vampira, but couldn't you just get Greta Garbo? It's the same thing.
I mean, Greta Garbo would have been phenomenal in that role as well, I'm sure.
It's very true. It's very true. But Ed Wood was always nice about bringing his friends in on the things that he was doing, and he wanted to keep working with all of his friends all of the time. So, why not?
Why not? Why not indeed?
Although I think she gave some pretty good reasons. So.
Exactly. But who else is in this movie? Who else, Charlotte? Who are you excited to see in this movie?
I mean, there were lots of people I was excited to see, but the person whose performance gave me the most pleasure to watch was Estelle. Estelle Winwood was so good.
I mean, we can all understand what Crow sees in her.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I don't know if I would throw off Kim Cattrall for her because Kim Cattrall is also pretty ding-dang amazing, but Estelle is right up there.
There's a little moment when they first sort of introduce Estelle Winwood's character where Tom and Joel both make a sort of, old, unattractive woman response. And then Crow goes, well...
Say.
Well...
And I love that moment because it is such a vibe. It is such a vibe when there's somebody who most people are finding unattractive or uninteresting in that way. But there's one little freak who's like, this is exactly my jam, actually. I bless that freak.
Yeah. There's a line in a movie that I really love where this guy says something like, what are you talking about? When I wanted to date that person, you guys all started making fun of me. But now that person wants to make me, screw you guys. I hate high school. It's a great movie.
So yay for Crow for accepting his tastes, even if other people disagreed with them. And yay for Estelle Winwood, who seems like she was a great old lady.
Mm-hmm. It seems like she's made a whole career of it. I mean, I don't know. I had to go and watch a couple of things with Estelle Winwood in it because she seems so familiar in so many ways, but everything that I could find easily to watch that she's in, she's basically an old lady. She doesn't even have the like flaming red dyed hair that she has inside of this performance. She's usually just, with the gray and white hair with the, kind of 20s style short bob cut going on.
Yeah, they make a reference at some point about how it's in the song actually that Crow sings about how she was in Bewitched. And she was in one episode of Bewitched. I believe her character was named Enchantra, but I found that out now looking up IMDb. At the time, I was just like, oh yeah, that's totally Andorra, as played by Agnes Moorehead. That's who Estelle Winwood is. Like, I knew both of those facts watching it as a teen, and yet it still was like, this is who they're talking about.
Yeah, well, I mean, it certainly helps that the wig that she's wearing with the red hair looks like the hair that Agnes Moorehead has inside of Bewitched, right? It's the clearly not natural red hair color and that short cut, right? With the ringlets and stuff. Like, that looks like, that's the look of Agnes Moorehead as the grandma character. But Estelle went, like, I was looking at her, I'm like, she's not Tabitha's grandma. Like, you're not selling this to me. And so I also had to look it up and I'm like, oh, okay, she's like some old auntie or something, which totally tracks.
Yeah.
That works. I'm totally fine with that. But Agnes Moorehead, like, let's not put her aside. She was great in Bewitched.
Of course. But let's talk about Estelle.
Yes, please. Oh, she's so good.
I also had to look up her list of credits, and I guess I had seen her in something else because she's in The Producers.
Oh, so The Producers famously has like the Zero Mostel, if you're talking about the older one.
Yeah, that one,
yeah,
the real one.
Courting a whole bunch of old ladies to get them to put up money for a play. So which of the old ladies is she?
She's the one with top billing. She's Hold Me, Touch Me.
Hold me, touch me. Oh my gosh, which, famously an old lady, right? That's what The Producers is all about, is scamming money from old ladies.
I mean, that is 5 years after The Magic Sword, so she didn't get younger in that time.
No, she didn't. Although I watched things, well, let's see, what year was The Magic Sword from?
1962.
So I watched 3 things that were TV shows that were done before The Magic Sword, where she is a gray-haired old lady. One of which is a Twilight Zone episode. You know how I love the Twilight Zone.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So there's a Twilight Zone episode. It's called Long Live Walter Jameson. And it's about a guy who has been alive for 2,000 years and hasn't aged. And he, had some alchemist give him this like long life type of thing, right? And his friend is finding out about it and is like, you can't marry my daughter. She's a young woman. You keep doing this to ladies throughout your 2,000 years. And he's like, I will marry your daughter if I want to. And then who is Estelle? Estelle is his former wife, who is now a super old lady who corners him in his house when he's trying to pack and run away, and elope with a younger lady. And she's like, you're my husband. I totally recognize you. You didn't get old and I did. And I can't let you do this to anybody else. And she ends up killing him.
Oh.
But famously, like, she's the old lady who's grown old while this person has stayed young around her. So, and that's from like 1960. But I also watched, oh my gosh. So there was an Alfred Hitchcock Presents episode that she was in where she was an old lady. I mean,
Did she kill somebody there?
Yes.
Oh, good.
In both of the Alfred Hitchcock Presents episodes that she was in. But in one of them, she's in like an old house in like a quiet neighborhood. And it's a boarding house and she lives with like 4 other old biddies. And they're, the classic spinster that never got married, but is still just like, oh, all of our beaux went away and we're not courted anymore. So now they spy out the windows on the young men inside of the neighborhood and they watch them when they're inside of their bathroom shaving and stuff. Oh. It is creepy. Anyway, they decide that they want to get the young man's attention and they know that he's a policeman. He's a detective in homicide. So what do? They draw the lots, or presumably, right? Context clues tell you that they drew lots prior to the episode starting.
Uh-huh.
And they killed one of them. They poisoned one of the old ladies in the house. And then they called this guy across the street and they're like, you have to come and solve the murder. Right? Why don't you sit down and have some tea with us? It's been so long since we've had a gentleman caller. And then when it doesn't work, they draw lots again and kill another one. It's great. And Estelle, of course, is the person who owns the house. And so she's the one who eventually confesses to killing both of them. And he has to handcuff her and take her away. And she is just beaming because she's like, look at my gentleman caller taking me out of the house. It's such a good vibe. So, yes, so she kills two of her friends in order to get a young man to come and be her gentleman caller. Oh, and then, of course, he's like, I don't want to be homicide anymore. I want to be something else, like put me on fires or something. And so what do? They burn down the house. It's great.
I mean, it just sounds like she can deliver those kinds of roles.
Oh, absolutely.
Older women who are making, let's say, big choices about their lives.
Yes. and definitely given that like old lady, but not grandma vibe.
No.
Right? Like she's not giving like you wouldn't have cast her in The Body Electric, right? Where she's the grandma and the matron, of a family. She's like spinster woman. Like that's the vibe she's given. And I think that's why she's so good in The Magic Sword, right? Because she's like this, immortal sorceress, although not very good at the sorcery part of the sorceress ring. But yeah, she gives that vibe of like, I'm not a mom, I'm a spinster. I don't really know how to raise this human boy.
Exactly. She adopted the kid, but like doesn't really know what to be doing about it.
Yeah, it's true. I did watch something else with her in it.
Yeah.
I watched Darby O'Gill and the Little People.
Now, there's a reference to that when they free the little tiny people that are in a cage that are like, shrunken down size people.
And I don't think they made that reference because Estelle is in it. I don't know. Maybe they did because they are very wily like that. But she is in Darby O'Gill and the Little People. Have you seen that?
I had never heard of it until you mentioned it, and I looked up a clip that you were talking about.
See, I remember watching, I think that was like, okay, it's not in the same league as, but it's like The Sound of Music and The Wizard of Oz that would be on kind of regularly on TV. Because my family and I would watch the Sunday night presentations of like Walt Disney Presents.
Yeah.
And they would show some of the older movies that they made. And Darby O'Gill was absolutely one of them. And it terrified the crap out of me. Not because of the leprechauns, because of the banshee.
Yes, and this was the scene that I looked up when you mentioned it because I wanted to see just how terrifying this banshee was.
And the clip that you sent me isn't even the most terrifying part of the banshee.
Oh no, there's more?
There's more. So there's two. So there's when he's up on the hill and the banshee's coming down towards Darby O'Gill and his daughter, and she's combing her hair, coming for Katie, who is the daughter. That's the part that you showed me.
Right.
She shows up later when Katie's on her deathbed and knocks on Darby O'Gill's door. And then you get to see this like modeled face. And it looks like the face of the hag in The Magic Sword, but all muddled with the light and everything, like the rest of the effect of the banshee. And that's what terrified me, right? Like the decaying face.
Oh. Okay.
And the wailing and all that. Oh.
Yeah, because, it's that sort of special superimposed effect which you see in some of these older movies where they are sort of glowing, but they're clearly just sort of, I don't know how they did this effect. Feel free to write in if you know, listener. I'd love to find out. But it's like they're sort of green screened everything behind them and they've chroma keyed the face on, but it's a bit translucent and a bit glowy and it just looks off and a bit sickly. And it's a bit like when in the Star Wars movies when they do force time calling, and one of
Sure.
the ghosts of Obi-Wan shows up, and it's sort of like that. It's a more primitive version of that.
Yeah, but it's but appropriate for the Banshee. It's not a friendly ghost, right? Like the effect doesn't convey friendly, supportive ghost the way that Obi-Wan does. It is definitely menacing. Like I do not want to see the Banshee. I don't want to hear the Banshee. This is not a part of like the process of my death that I want to know anything about.
Now, does Estelle Winwood play the Banshee?
Alas, no. So Estelle Winwood is a mom who lives in the village near where Darby O'Gill and his daughter live. And she has a son. And Darby O'Gill is kind of a caretaker for an estate of, some sort of landed gentry Englishman, right? Anyway, Estelle's character wants her son to become the next caretaker. And she wants her son to marry Katie because Katie is super competent, right? And she's the only reason Darby O'Gill still has the job he has.
Okay.
So if her son marries Katie and the two of them go in front of like the Lord of the Manor, she's like, yes, my son will be the one who he hires. But instead, of course, the Lord has already brought in somebody, a Dublin man. You might know him. His name is Sean Connery.
Oh, well, there's no chance you're going to compete with Sean Connery.
Absolutely not. Sean Connery is totally getting that job. So this is before he was James Bond, too.
He's still Sean Connery.
Sean Connery. And he sings the song, My Pretty Irish Girl. I didn't know that was from Darby O'Gill until I watched this again, but of course it's a Disney song.
I don't know that song at all because I've never watched this movie.
Oh, you totally know the song. Oh, she's my dear, my darling one, my smiling and beguiling one, no other. No, you don't know this song? Oh,
no, because I didn't grow up with this movie.
How could you? Yeah, but the song was okay. In my household, Disney was kind of everywhere, and so, of course, this song was everywhere. But yeah, Darby O'Gill, it's so fun. He, captures the king of the leprechauns, and he gets a whole bunch of wishes, and everybody in town believes him except for Estelle Winwood's son, who mocks him for, pretending to think that the little people are real. And, joke's on him. They're flipping real, everybody.
How racist is this movie?
Well... Probably a lot, right?
I'm sure the Irish accents are better than the ones we get in The Magic Sword.
Yeah. I mean, frankly, Estelle Winwood has one of the better ones.
But Estelle's not the only familiar face in this movie.
No, she certainly is not.
I knew when I first saw this episode way back in the day that Basil Rathbone was famous for playing Sherlock Holmes, but I'd never seen him as Sherlock Holmes.
I feel like I must have watched him as Sherlock Holmes because I loved Sherlock Holmes as a kid. That was one of my favorite characters. In middle school, I even wrote a play.
What?
Where it wasn't Sherlock Holmes, it was Sherlock Holmes, and I played the title character. I wrote the play, I played the title character. Is this sounding terrible already? It was horrible,
No, this sounds amazing. Dig that up. I'm going to write to your mother and have her find it. I'm sure she's got it somewhere.
I don't know if anybody recorded it. I don't even know if I would have typed it up, right? This is middle school. We didn't have a typewriter. We didn't have a computer. It's not going to be on some zip drive somewhere.
This is a tragedy.
Perhaps it is. And, hopefully my friends from middle school will be like, oh, no, it was great. But anyway, I loved the character of Sherlock Holmes, so I must have seen him, but I don't remember his performance. And so I had to watch some more. Did you get around to watching some Basil Rathbone as well?
I did finally, which is to say yesterday, I finally got around to watching the very first Basil Rathbone Sherlock Holmes film, which is The Hound of the Baskervilles from 1939.
Oh, what a good story that one is. How did he do? What did you think of him?
Well, first off, the movie is gorgeous, let me just say.
Excellent.
My understanding is that the first two Basil Rathbone Sherlock Holmes movies were made by 20th Century Fox, and they spent a lot of money on it. And apparently, Hound of the Baskervilles is the first Sherlock Holmes film that's actually set in Victorian times.
Oh.
Like, it's the first one where they didn't just sort of naturally put it up to date because Sherlock Holmes felt old enough now that it meant something to have it set back then.
Oh, that is fascinating.
Yeah, that was kind of interesting to think about. But the other thing is that quite a lot of the movie, as you might imagine, is, it's all about mysterious things happening on the moors and the Baskerville clan leaders being killed off by a fabled dog, the Hound of the Baskervilles, right?
Did they do an effect with like a glowing big dog on the moors and stuff?
Nope. They just had a big, angry Rottweiler type dog.
Huh. I must have seen a different Hound of the Baskervilles. Maybe it was like, what's his toes? Jeremy
Irons, yeah.
Jeremy Brett or something like that.
Yeah, Jeremy Brett played Sherlock Holmes.
I think I might have seen his Hound of the Baskervilles.
Well, so the moors, these, wastelands, so to speak, they're all filmed on a soundstage, of course.
Of course.
But it's gorgeous. And it's a black and white film, of course. It's 1939. But there's really beautiful foreground, middle ground, background action going on. There's really good use of darks. There's some really good use of light vignetting to make it look even more sort of dark and creepy. They're just walking through these fog-filled moors throughout most of the film, and it's gorgeous. It made me think, because this is how my brain is wired, it made me think about Plan 9 from Outer Space, which has a lot of wandering around a set of a graveyard. Obviously, that is not as beautifully filmed. But,
perhaps no.
It felt like there was a relationship. The movie was gorgeous. As far as the performance of Sherlock Holmes, from this movie, from Magic Sword, I got it in my head that Basil Rathbone's version of Sherlock Holmes must be a little bit camp.
Yeah, I remember you saying that, and I didn't have that impression at all of his Sherlock Holmes.
Well, that's because it's completely wrong.
Yeah.
So I feel like Basil Rathbone, once he sort of lost the Sherlock Holmes franchise, must have loosened up a bit once he started showing up in Bert I. Gordon films. I
mean, honestly, it makes sense. Sherlock Holmes is not a campy character unless you're Robert Downey Jr. But come on, it's a really serious character. If you're going to throw some camp in there, you got to throw it in with your Watson, right? Your Watson has to be the guy, So I watched some Basil Rathbone Sherlock Holmes, but they were later ones. I watched The Secret Weapon and The Woman in Green. And one of the big takeaways for me was just I hate their Watson. Not the way they wrote Watson for Nigel Bruce was horrible. They wrote him to be completely bumbling and incompetent, and I don't think that that's a fair characterization of Watson.
Interesting. He plays it in the 20th Century Fox films as well as all of the Universal films, which were made much more cheaply. And
sure.
I don't know if they were as beautiful as the first film was.
They were much more constricted. The set for I watched one that was called Terror by Night, and Terror by Night took place in a train, kind of like Murder on the Orient Express. So there were really limited sets, and you didn't get to do the whole sweeping fog of the moors or anything like that, right? It was just compartment on a train. So if you're dealing with a small budget, that seems like a great way to tell a story, right? And fine, whatever. They're dealing with their budget constraints in a really good way. But they're Dr. Watson. He's just he's a bumbling idiot. He's a fool. He's distracting from it. He loses things. He gets tricked all the time. And then towards the end of the thing, when they're getting to the point where they have to solve something, he makes some offhanded comment that makes Sherlock Holmes go, oh, by Jove, Watson, you've got it. That's exactly the information I needed to know to put all of this together and make the puzzle clear so that I can capture the criminal. And it's oh, you bumbling fool. That's not what Watson's like.
Well, maybe.
No, he's not.
So I also finally got around to reading some actual Sherlock Holmes stories, which I've been meaning to do. And I read A Study in Scarlet, which I will be talking about on my other bookish podcast soon. I don't know which episode's going to come out first, but we're recording this one first, so soon. And Watson, while not a complete idiot is definitely like wrong a lot, and Sherlock Holmes rubs it in his face a lot.
Totally. But that's because Sherlock Holmes is a jerk.
Yes.
Like Watson is thinking out loud and Sherlock Holmes won't say a thing unless he's done thinking about it. Like it's a very different way to process information.
But you know what else I read?
What's that?
Trying to get some context for thinking about Sherlock Holmes is I read a Hercule Poirot book. I read the
Yes!
ABC Murders.
Oh, he's so good. I love Hercule Poirot.
But Hercule Poirot's Watson, whose name I've already forgotten.
Colonel Hastings.
Colonel Hastings, that's it. Hastings is a buffoon.
Yes, he is. And he is always led by women, which, you know, to be fair, Dr. Watson is too, right? Like if there's a woman involved in the crime, Watson is going to fall for whatever she's putting forward. And Colonel Hastings is just the same.
But Hastings also says things that everybody thinks are kind of stupid or not worth paying attention to, which Poirot is like, that's the key. You naif. You said the very thing that has unlocked the case for me.
Which this version of Basil Rathbone totally has Nigel Bruce doing that as his Watson.
Exactly. So I wonder if it's been influenced by the Agatha Christie novels, which would have come out already by that
possibly.
point. If they're thinking Watson through the lens of Hastings. It's an interesting idea. I don't know.
Maybe. Because certainly, like, when I think of Watson, I don't think of him in that manner. Like, he's not a brilliant Sherlock Holmes, but he's a competent companion. He's a good doctor who knows his stuff, right? He can do some of the medical things that, like, Sherlock Holmes may not be as adept with, you know, living people and stuff. And then he's also a good shot and has been involved in the war, right? Like, every characterization of him has that, so that he's actually worth having along when you're out doing something that's potentially dangerous. Whereas Nigel Bruce, the character that they've written for him, not competent.
Hey everybody, it's time for the Shallow 13.
It's time for the Shallow 13. 13 big swings taking aim with today's experiment, the magic sword. Go, Charlotte, go!
A quick review of the people Tom claims are much better looking than Estelle Winwood, beginning with Fred Biletnikoff and Brandon Tartikoff. Fred played football for the Oakland Raiders in the 60s. Remember when the Raiders were in Oakland? Yeah. Brandon Tartikoff ran NBC during its heyday in the 1980s.
Sid and Marty Krofft are the creators of HR Puff and Stuff, Land of the Lost, and Pink Lady and Jeff. We have discussed them elsewhere.
Fred Gwynne played Herman Munster, and Anthony Quinn played Zorba the Greek, and Bob Dylan wrote a song inspired by him called The Mighty Quinn.
Rin Tin Tin was the most famous dog in early Hollywood. Much later, he inspired a terrible star-studded 1970s film called Wonton Ton, the Dog That Saved Hollywood, which I talked about with some of our podcasty friends over on our most recent Megaphonic holiday special for Patreon supporters. Turns out, it's a really bad film.
Then it's Pearl Bailey and Moms Mabley and Mayor Daley. Pearl Bailey was a singer and actor who co-starred with Dick Van Dyke in Tubby the Tuba, written by the guy who wrote The Christmas That Almost Wasn't. Moms Mabley was a lesbian Chitlin Circuit comedian who we've discussed before. And Mayor Daley is either Richard Daley, mayor of Chicago, or his son, Richard Daley, mayor of Chicago.
Hank and Phoebe Snow refers to Hank Snow, the Canadian country singer and yodeler, and Phoebe Snow, the American singer-songwriter who did Poetry Man.
Surely you know Ethel Merman and Pee Wee Herman. Surely. The role of Dolly in Hello, Dolly was written with Ethel Merman in mind, though Pearl Bailey won the Tony for it, and my grandma saw Carol Channing in the role. Pee Wee Herman created one of the greatest Christmas specials ever televised.
Strom Thurmond is another complete face of a politician, and Vince Lombardi was a football player or something. Whatever. The important thing is he's got a rest stop on the New Jersey Turnpike named after him.
Next come George and Jesus Jones. George Jones was a country singer with like 1 million hits, including He Stopped Loving Her Today. Jesus Jones was a band mostly known for their one hit, Right Here, Right Now.
Edith Head was the classic Hollywood costume designer, so famous that she inspired a They Might Be Giants song. And Mr. Ed was the talking horse who starred in a 1960s sitcom whose beloved theme song inspired a They Might Be Giants song.
Nostradamus was an astrologer from the Middle Ages, or arguably the early Renaissance, who wrote a book of prophecies that may or may not be coming true. And Danny Thomas was an actor who founded St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital in Memphis, which is an astonishing resource and a heck of a legacy.
Sherman Helmsley played George Jefferson of The Jeffersons and did not go on to found a world-renowned children's research hospital. But I feel like we're setting the bar a little too high if we judge people for whether or not they founded a world-renowned children's research hospital, you know?
And finally, as Tom heads off stage, he mentions Willie DeVille and Agnes DeMille and Cruella DeVille and Roscoe Tanner.
And I'm sorry, but that's time.
You know, Chris, there's somebody that I want to talk about, and I feel like I might not have even pulled his name out of the riffs, except that he has recently passed, and that's David Lynch.
Yeah, there were a few references to some David Lynch things. It wasn't like a theme that they were running on, and it wasn't like there was anything connecting it.
No, it wasn't a theme. There were two of them. There's one where they have one of the henchmen who has kind of like a cone head thing, and they refer to him as a racer head. And then, later on they make a Twin Geeks instead of Twin Peaks. And it just, I don't know if either of those things would have necessarily popped for me as much any other time. But I figured, we are right near the passing of David Lynch, and so much has been discussed about him recently that I thought we might talk a little bit about him here.
Yeah, I remember that you were a big fan of Twin Peaks back in the day,
Yes.
but I don't remember if you were a big fan of David Lynch overall.
I mean, I think because of Twin Peaks at the time, anything that he was putting out, I was watching. So very soon after Twin Peaks was over, he did the movie The Straight Story, and I saw it in theaters, right? Like, I was there because of the Twin Peaks connection for me, right? And I mean, obviously, there are a lot of actors that David Lynch used in multiple of his productions, and one of my favorite characters from Twin Peaks is Big Ed, who's the guy who is the mechanic who works at the gas station, and he is in the movie The Straight Story, and he sells the main character the John Deere tractor that he drives across the world in, or it feels like it, to be able to visit his family. But I didn't go back and watch like every single movie David Lynch had ever made. Like I didn't become like a true like Lynch fan. I would totally be called a poser by people who are really deep in the lore,
And who are jerks.
Maybe. But like I've never actually seen Eraserhead. Like I've seen stills from it, but I haven't ever actually seen the movie Eraserhead, which is one of his first films that came out, right?
It is his first film, yeah.
Have you seen it?
Well, because of this, I watched it last night.
What'd you think?
Heck of a movie to watch before going to bed.
Ooh, I suppose. Actually, I don't know much about it. How come?
Well, okay, so Eraserhead I've wanted to see for a long, long time, but put off seeing it because I had heard that it's a bit body horror.
Oh, yeah, that's not your thing.
It's not. And sure enough, it's real body horror in as much as it's about a guy, sort of average guy, who this woman that he's, romantically involved with has had a baby. Or at the hospital, she says, they're not sure it's a baby.
What?
Yeah, because it's a really creepy thing. It's really well done. First off, let me also say this is a beautiful film. It's a beautiful black and white film with really wonderful values in terms of like the dark and the light, and it plays off it like every frame a painting kind of thing. Super gorgeous film, slow paced, surrealist. I'm not even going to try to do a plot summary beyond guy has a baby. Baby is a freaked up little thing. He has nightmares. There's a lot of sex anxiety and body anxiety and so forth. Aliens ? I don't know.
Aliens ?
Watch the movie if that's exciting to you.
That totally sounds like a David Lynch thing. It's just like, and messed up timeline ?
Yep. Oh, that was a dream sequence, I guess. Okay.
Dream sequence ?
Oh, you'll be surprised to know it's a David Lynch film. There's a sequence where a woman is on stage at a kind of nightclub that might be a dreamscape, and she
What?
sings a song.
And are there red curtains? It's black and white. You wouldn't know. Never mind.
There are curtains that might as well be red. You're pretty sure it's got like a checkerboard pattern on the floor.
Is the music sort of like dreamy 50s theme?
Yep. Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Oh, I love all of those things. I love those things in Twin Peaks. And they show up in Mulholland Drive. And they're not so much in The Straight Story. The Straight Story seems like it's a total departure from these things that I'm used to seeing in David Lynch movies.
I also, just a few days ago, got around to watching Mulholland Drive, finally.
Oh,
it was real good. But rarely have I cackled so much at a film for what is this film even doing? What is the story? What is going on here?
Yeah.
I loved every minute of it.
Ann Miller jump scare. She's great.
Ann Miller jump scare. Yes, absolutely. I mean, so many different kinds of jump scares.
Very true. Yes.
Yeah,
Wow.
no. Mulholland Drive was fantastic. I loved so much about it. Eraserhead was also really great, though I did have to hide my eyes for several sequences. The special effect of the baby, apparently David Lynch did it himself, because this is basically a student film that he spent 5 years making and whatever.
Wow.
It is incredibly effective. It's incredibly good. It is incredibly gross, and it gets grosser over the course of the film. So be wary about that. But I managed to get through it, and with judicious closing of your eyes, you can too, I suspect.
Oh.
Well, I mean, you might be fine with it, listener, and also Charlotte. I don't know. I definitely, I made it through it. It was pretty fun.
Yeah, I mean, when you're forced into the constraints of what can be shown on television, I think a lot of those things that he might have put into Twin Peaks, the TV show, could not get into Twin Peaks, the TV show, because you just can't show some of those things on TV, or at least you couldn't inside of the early 90s. I did watch the Twin Peaks movie, Fire Walk with Me.
I've also seen that, even though I never got into the TV show and have only seen half an episode.
Oh man. So the TV show is so much better. Part of that is because he was working with Mark Frost, who knew a lot about television, right? And
Right.
preparing something for television and writing a script that was going to be appropriate for that. But my favorite part of Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me is Chris Isaac. I mean,
Oh, sure.
he's amazing in it. And there is some body horror that ends up making it into the movie, as I recall, although God, it's been decades since I've seen Fire Walk with Me. That doesn't end up inside of the TV show, but the TV show is so nicely paced. It's so beautiful. You have all of these fantastic characters that are inside of it. You have the guy who plays Eraserhead as Pete, I think, inside of Twin Peaks. So again, like David Lynch, like Ed Wood, is bringing back these actors that he's worked with over and over again, and it's lovely. I love that.
Well, I will say the best part of Firewalk with Me for me was I was watching it with a bunch of friends at this guy's house, and because I hadn't seen the TV show, I was a little bit not interested in watching the movie. Mm-hmm. and it was agreed that the nice, attractive young man whose apartment we were at would give me a foot massage during the entire movie. So the foot massage, the 2-hour foot massage, absolutely smoothed over all of the I have no idea what's going on moments of the movie.
I mean, frankly, I watched the Twin Peaks TV show and watched Fire Walk with Me, and I was like, I don't know, guys. This is not a coherent storyline in a lot of ways. I mean, I even read The Secret Diary of Laura Palmer, right? That got published. I bought it at my local bookstore and read The Secret Diary of Laura Palmer. Oh my goodness.
So I never got into Twin Peaks, but I did watch religiously his follow-up show, which nobody watched. It was canceled very quickly, called On the Air.
Oh, what? Tell me about On the Air.
It's a David Lynch and Mark Frost thing. It's a sitcom ? That's taking place in like the 50s at a TV station with a bunch of weird characters. And it's a comedy. It's meant to be a comedy.
It's the Mary Tyler Moore Show.
Kind of. Yeah, I mean, it's a David Lynch thing. Like, there's all sorts of weird stuff. There's, like in today's movie, The Magic Sword, there are two twins who share a sweater. Let's say two conjoined twins who share a sweater,
Okay.
and they're called the Hurry Up Twins. And every scene that they're in is just them walking briskly saying, "Hurry up, hurry up, hurry up."
Oh my gosh, I watched this show. Oh my gosh.
That is the
I
most
didn't
memorable thing
remember it
about
at
the
all.
show.
That's
But,
the only, you saying that, I'm just like, oh, I remember the Hurry Up Twins. I don't remember anything else.
I feel like I'm long overdue a rewatching of all 6 or 7 episodes. I can't remember that they made of it. I don't think they all got aired the first time, but yeah. I've enjoyed, I think, all the David Lynch I've seen.
Mm-hmm. Have you watched his Dune?
I did watch his Dune a million years ago when a boyfriend made me watch it, even though I had no interest, and didn't give me a 3-hour-long foot massage.
Well, he was not using the right tactics to get you involved.
Nope. And I saw Blue Velvet back in the day. I've missed a lot of them, but
Wow, I loved Blue Velvet. I mean, it was also totally messed up, but Kyle MacLachlan is beautiful. Isabella Rossellini,
yeah.
wow, she is so beautiful. Dennis Hopper, fucking scary. Scary as all get out. He is scary.
Yeah.
Wow. Sorry, I didn't mean to go on that tangent. I had forgotten. I watched Dune recently. I never watched it inside of the 80s, but like Kyle MacLachlan is one of my favorite actors because of Twin Peaks, right? Like I even watched episodes of Sex in the City in order to see Kyle MacLachlan because he dates Charlotte. Anyway, yeah. I watched it and was pleasantly surprised to see Patrick Stewart in it. And Dean Stockwell. I adore both of those gentlemen.
And Sting in a little tiny blue bikini.
Yeah, Sting wandering around in a bikini. And apparently there's a fight with Sting in the end. I don't know. Like I watched Dune and all I can remember is the beginning parts of it before he gets to the desert planet. And he's, hanging out with Dean Stockwell with the really weird eyebrows and Patrick Stewart. And then my memory doesn't hold anything after that for some reason.
I feel like I've talked about this on the show a long time ago with Adam, but everything I remember about that version of Dune is because the guy who I was seeing at the time who made me watch it was really into Sting and had taken all of his lines of dialogue and made them like computer sounds, because he used to do that where you'd set it so that like on every quarter hour your computer would make a custom noise. And so every 15 minutes past the hour the computer would go, "The righteous," just like, as Sting says in the movie. And so that's what I remember the most.
Oh wow, what a memory to stick with you from a David Lynch film.
I mean, I think that is the thing about David Lynch, from what I can tell, as somebody who's not an expert but has enjoyed a lot of the things I've seen, is that, I was watching Mulholland Drive and cracking up being like, oh yeah, this movie is just weird little freaks doing weird little stuff for quite a lot of it, isn't it? I mean, it does sort of build up to more, but the fundamental unit of a David Lynch film is a weird little freak doing something absolutely baffling. And yes.
And if we could get to some hot lesbian sex, so much the better. That also seems to be a theme.
There's not as much of that in Eraserhead as you might think.
Well, it's just warming up to it.
Yeah.
There is by the time you get to Twin Peaks.
If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if you ever fell in love with Estelle, or if you'd like to ask us anything, get in touch with us. Our email is info@itsjustashow.com, and we're on Blue Sky, and we'd love to hear from you. This show is made possible by listeners like you, and like our randomly selected supporter, Mandrake. Oh, there's that name again. Thank you, Mandrake. For about $1 an episode, you too can be like Mandrake. You can help us research and record this show. You can join us on a friendly Discord, and you can listen to all our superfan bonus bits. Find out more at itsjustashow.com/Patreon or patreon.com/itsjustashow. And if you want to follow up on anything that was mentioned today, you'll find links in our show notes at itsjustashow.com/episode/169.
Nice. Estelle Winwood was amazing, Chris. Are we going to have somebody as inspiring inside of our next episode?
Well, okay. How do you feel about Frankie Avalon?
Beauty school dropout. No graduation day for you.
How do you feel about Klaus Kinski?
I don't know Klaus Kinski.
You know, from all the old Werner Herzog films. Because we're going to be looking at, we're doing it again. But this time we're doing season 13, episode 9, The Million Eyes of Sumeru.
Ooh.
But you know what this means is that you get some extra homework to do because you have to watch the KTMA episode to compare it to.
Do
We've
I?
already done that episode. So at least you don't have to talk about it for an extra hour. That's the nice thing.
Aw, that's super. All right, so I have 2 million eyes of Sumeru in my future.
Yeah, so we'll see how that goes. At least the season 13 episode is pretty fun. But until then,
You won't like me. I'm mock virgin. I'm gamey and stringy and tough.
let's form a girl group. Take it away, Theme Squad.